Welcome to Toy Business Unboxed, your gateway to the secrets of the toy industry. Here, Jason Shea, a toy entrepreneur and expert in the field.
Every product we develop is really inspired by some of the real life experience that we have with our son.
60% of all toys last year were sold on Amazon, which is incredible.
Be passionate about it because it's a road, it's a journey.
Like when you have an idea that you think is like gonna somewhat like change the world, make things better, I'd say go for it.
We'll guide you through the enchanting world of toy design, marketing, and manufacturing. Now let the unboxing begin.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of Toy Business Unboxed podcast. Today, we'll be diving deep into board game publishing with Jay, an industry veteran who went from designing game himself to running his own publishing companies, Off the Page Games, with a focusing on adapting indie comic into board games. And he also has successfully launched multiple games over his career. And he also teaches game design at Vancouver Film School. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today, Jay.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so can you first off sharing with our listener, how do you get into the industry many years ago?
Oh, I mean, I'm a very creative person. I've done a lot of theater in my background. And I think just creative people, when they like something, they want to create that as well. And so the thing I liked was board games. And so me and my friend Sen, who I co-designed a lot of these games with behind me, we eventually just said, you know, we could make a game. And so we started to try to actually make a game. And because it was our first foray at it and we didn't have the experience or skill set, the game really sucked and it wasn't good at all. So we kind of stopped. We stopped designing games as a friendship, and we just went and kept playing games. We didn't make any games. And it wasn't until I moved away from him across the country. I'm up in Canada, and where we decided we needed to stay in contact with each other some way. And we said, let's use board games as a way to stay in contact. Let's try to make board games again, even though now we're spread, in different cities, different provinces in Canada. Yeah. And so we did. And we started talking online and back and forth, coming up with ideas. And we had both play testing. And eventually we had like 5 or 6 games we designed. And we're like, what do we do with it now? And that's what started our whole journey.
I see. And which one is the first game that you designed?
Belfort was the first one that got published.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the first one that got signed. And so that and it ended up being a critical hit. Like people liked it when it first came out. And I think it's actually coming out again next year from another publisher.
I see. Okay. And I know your company have a very unique niche where you're focusing on working with indie comic books. Can you kind of tell a little bit more about that approach and why did you choose that route?
Yeah. So for about 15 years of my career was all as a freelance designer, designing for other publishers. Mm-hmm. And then in 2019, I started my own publishing company because the mind management game that I designed with Sen was signed to a publisher, but they actually went under, and we got the rights back to that game. And we were on a call with the owner of the IP, the creator of the comic. And we're all like, what do we do now? Who are we going to pitch this to? All this kind of stuff. And it was actually Matt Kint, the creator of the comic, said, why don't we just do it ourselves? He goes, I'll do all the graphic design, all the art, you publish it. So I talked it over with Sen, and at the time I had the bandwidth to be able to do it, and Sen had still does have a full-time job. And I said, well, I'll do it. I'll be a publisher. And Sen's like, great, let's do it. So I started becoming a publisher. And at the time I'm like, okay, now who am I? What am I going to be as a publisher? And just because this was based on one of my favorite comics of all time, I decided, what if all my games I make are based off of cool indie comics? And I don't have an in or anything in the industry. I don't know anybody besides Matt. And so that's what I said. That might have been my only game I ever published, maybe, but it ended up being a pretty big hit. And so it helped propel me. And then it was like, now I got to figure out what my next game is.
I see. What was some of the biggest challenge that you're facing when you first launching your own publishing company?
It's like everything is a challenge because it's a challenge, but a fun thing, because learning to me is the fun part. I was, for the longest time, when people ask, why don't you just become your own publisher? You'll make a lot more money. I'm like, I was always not interested. Love being a designer. Let the publisher worry about all that stuff. So I was worried that it was going to be all minutia, businessy stuff and just boring, tedious stuff that would make my love for the hobby diminish. And fortunately, it hasn't. Fortunately, it's the opposite. It's like being an owner of a company, a publishing company of board games, is still full of ton of creative control and ideas. Like you're not controlling the whole product, not just the game design and but the product starts from it being even before being on a shelf, like marketing and all this stuff. It's just there's a lot of creativity around creating the brand of your product. And that's part of the fun parts about running a business. So they're challenging as you learn all the legalities about how to legally get UPC codes, so you're not just downloading them off the internet for $10 or whatever. Like there's a lot of like customs and all this duties and freight, all that stuff. All that's a challenge. But my kind of internal motto has always been to emulate those who are doing well, like the successful ones. And so I see other companies and other publishers in my bracket and see what they're doing, and I just try to emulate what they're doing, because like I like what you're doing. Who are you using for this service? Okay, I'll use them too, because you've done your research and you've understood what's good, and I like what you're doing.
I see. And I think that I talk to a lot of people in the toys and game industry, and one of the major decisions they need to make as like an early designer or someone that's new to the industry is to either to go for self-publishing or go license the product to a bigger publisher.
Yeah.
From your perspective, can you kind of share some of the pros and cons on both?
Yeah, sure. Designing is a game, and then pitching it to a publisher, licensing it to them is an way easier way, even though it's still like hard. It's way easier way to get your game out in the market. You have to go to conventions, or you have to maybe do virtual pitches, but you have to somehow connect with publishers. And conventions are the best way, because then you get to meet them in person, get some FaceTime with them, and you can verbally explain your game so they don't misinterpret your game, maybe even play it if they have enough time. But that's hard if you've got one game that you're trying to pitch. That's a really hard. The cost return is really hard.
Yeah.
But every time I went to a convention, I had 5, 6, 7, or 8 games I was pitching.
Oh,
so I'd go up to a publisher and I'd go through them really quickly, and they say, "These two look interesting. Tell me more about those two." So I was really efficiently able to use my time. And then there's things called speed datings, where you sit down with your game set up, and then publishers come by every 5 minutes. And they rotate.
Okay.
So there's really interesting things there. Conventions. So that's all great, but in the end, you don't control the product. So they're gonna develop it. Oftentimes, in my case, it's always been for the better. I only had, I think, one example where they developed it to a point where I didn't like what they did with it. But most of the time, it's good. But if they also want to change the theme, which I've never cared if they did or not, and I'm trying to think if they ever did change the theme in any of my. I don't think any of my games they did change the theme, but they could. You pick a game about ponies, and they want to make it about flowers, whatever. They can change it if they want.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the messaging and stuff like that. I know we had one issue in one game. It was an expansion for Belfort, and it had a lot of the characters were male, and so there was a bit of like, how come there aren't any female fantasy characters in this? And we kind of the publisher didn't know how to handle that right, and so they just kind of backed away and shut down. And they were and it was like, if I was running it, I'd be like, "Oh, this is great input," and like, engage with the audience who's asking for this stuff. So that's the downside of being a designer, and you don't have control over the whole messaging that's going out. But as a self-publisher, it's a lot of people think like, "Oh, just put it on Kickstarter, make a game, put it on Kickstarter. It's easy," and it's like that's not easy at all.
It's not easy. Yeah,
it's not easy at all. Like just the Kickstarter alone, that's a whole. You could have 100 podcasts just about how to do the Kickstarter, but then you're running a business. Like what do you do with all the rest of your, like, if you just print exactly what you need for Kickstarter, there are publishers that do that. They're just Kickstarter publishers. They put a Kickstarter out, they make as many as they need, plus a few more they can maybe sell online, but that's it. Then they don't have to worry about overstock and all this kind of stuff. As long as you can hit your minimum order quantity, your MOQ, so that you're, whether it's 500 or 1,000, as long as you can hit that, then you're fine. But if you only sold like 342 games on Kickstarter and you got to do 500, so where are the other ones going? In your garage? Like people don't think about that, especially if you want to get more to get that per unit price down. I want to get up to 1,000 or 2,000 units so I can get my per unit price down.
Yes.
Okay, well, where are those units going? Now you got to pay for storage somewhere.
Yeah.
And how are you getting them out to people? How are people going to know about it after the Kickstarter? Kickstarter is a great marketing tool, but now you have to get people to know your game exists and somehow give them a way to buy it. They're not just going to be flooding to your website to buy it. Are you going to Amazon? How are you going to do that? Like everything's now it's a business you're running. So you got to figure,
Mhm.
you have to have those chops. If you're not willing to have those chops, then I would recommend pitching your game to publishers than self-publishing.
I see. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think you did both over your career.
Yeah.
So like right now, do you still pitch some of your
Yeah.
design to publisher? And
I'm-
so
I guess I'm big enough that
Yeah.
I get commissioned. So some
Okay.
publishers ask me, hey, can you make this game? So I'm rarely pitching a game to
Okay,
publishers,
anymore. Okay.
but it still happens where I still have an idea just out of the blue and I have to pitch it. So sometimes I'll use that for my own publishing company.
Yeah.
But if I can't find a way to make it fit a comic book or it doesn't fit my brand, then I'll try to pitch it to another publisher.
Oh, okay. You kind of answer my follow-up questions. Like, how do you decide which one to pitch and which one to do the self-publishing route?
Yeah. Well, there's like, it's got to fit. I got to find a comic book for it. So sometimes I have a game and I'm trying to find out what comic could fit with it. For example, I just had Bruno Faiduti pitch me a game and it had some bluffing in it. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I was trying to think of a comic and I thought of a comic and I'm trying to contact the comic creator right now. It's called the Department of Truth. And it's it would just fit perfectly with the theme of bluffing because it's all about truth and not truth and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So now it's just about chasing down the IP owners.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question since you mentioned that. So a lot of the game that you design, do you go after the comic first and based on the story to create the game, or the other way around to create the game first
Both.
and based on the mechanism matched with the?
So I'll go through each one real quickly. For my management, he asked us for a game out of like almost out of the blue. We're like, oh my God, we'd love to make a mind management game, but it took us 5 years to find that game.
Oh, whoa.
Because we couldn't figure it out. We were like we came at least five totally different versions, starting from scratch and totally different versions.
I see.
And none of them felt like it until we got to the mechanic where it was a hidden movement game that made us feel like we were really in a psychic espionage type of story. It was great. So then we got it. Then I'm like, okay, what's game number 2? Once I got that published, I think game number 2. I had a game that was called Skirmishes, and I'm like, this feels like a fun game. I didn't know what comic to set it in. And I set up a meeting with Cullen Bunn and Tyler Crook. I got their contact through I think Matt or something. And they wrote Harrow County. And that's this one. Okay. And so I pitched it to them. And they, through the success of my management, believed in me enough to say, yeah, let's do it. And the game changed so much. So we had a game, but it changed so much. It was very symmetrical before, and it turned into a very asymmetric game where everybody had different goals and how they played was different because of how the comic was. And the third one was Core of Discovery. And that one was, I had another game that was surviving on a deserted island. Okay. And I'm like, that'll be a cool game. But I'm like, I don't know any comic about surviving a deserted island. So we put it actually on social media. We're like, does anybody know any comics about surviving a deserted island or on a planet or exploring an island or a planet or something? And somebody from Skybound Comics said Manifest Destiny. I hadn't read that one. So I read it and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And immediately I'm like, for sure, this can work. This can work. And so we adapted that to, instead of surviving, it was more about exploring. And in the story Manifest Destiny, you're also killing monsters. And then for Grendel, it was the fact that the creator of Grendel, Matt Wagner, Grendel's our next game that's coming out this summer on Kickstarter. He emailed and just out of the blue said, hey, can you make a game based on my comic? And it was just from the success of the other games, he just saw value in what we were doing. So I was brainstorming with Sen, my often co-designer, and said, maybe, what would be a cool game would be a 1 versus many, which doesn't really exist, but that's kind of a neat idea. And he immediately was like, oh, I have a game like that. He goes, Alara and I designed a game. It was aliens versus Predator versus Marines. But it never got picked up.
Okay.
But the mechanics he thinks could work. And so he showed me the game. And I'm like, yeah, maybe this could work. And so we've been working on it for over 2 years, trying to get it to come out to really make it fit with the Grendel IP. And now it does. It's perfect. Yeah. So that's part of our whole brand is it's got to be so tied to the IP that if you don't know the brand, it's going to be a fun game and you're going to have a good time with the game. That even if you have no idea what it is, that's a big goal of ours. It's got to be a good game first. Okay. But then if you do know the brand and the IP, you're going to get a lot more out of it. You're like, oh, I see why this is this way. And I get this. Oh, this is a nice nod to that storyline and this beat. So it's really cool.
Okay, so does a lot of the customer, do they know the game first or do they know the comic
Oh,
first?
well, it's starting to change a little bit because now I'm getting people. Most at the beginning, people had no idea, and I didn't advertise that on purpose. I didn't say based on the hit comic on my marketing anywhere, because
Oh.
I personally find that when I'm walking in a convention and I see a big poster saying based on the hit comic, and I look down and I've never heard of that comic before, sometimes I'm like, I don't know what that is. I'll keep.
Yeah,
It's not for me, I guess, because I don't know
I
what that
see.
is. So I
Okay.
don't use that as my marketing tactic.
Okay.
But now, imagine I said, "Hey, tell me your favorite game," and you told me your favorite board game, and I said, "What if I told you there was an amazing comic book about that game, and you could
Mhm.
read?" You'd be like, "What? About my favorite game?
Oh, okay.
I want to read that." And
Hmm.
so that's what people who play the game and then learn that there's a comic, they're like, "Really?" And they're
Oh,
excited, and then they go
I
read the
see.
comic.
I
And so
see.
now I have people that come up and ask me, "What's your next game you're going to make? Because I want to go read that comic." It's
Okay,
awesome.
okay. That's interesting. I see. Yeah, and I know there's a lot, sounds like there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of brainstorming, but how do you decide which game concept is worth pursuing as a publisher yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question because I find as a designer and now especially as a publisher, I
Mhm.
want to make games that deserve to exist. That's not the best way to say that. That offers something unique and different, not just in its skin,
Mhm.
but in its actual design.
Mm.
So every game that I've done has something really unique to it to have a hook. Like
Okay.
the Harrow County, for example, on this game, it has a cube tower built right into the box. So there's an
Oh, okay.
actual hole in the box, and you
In the
drop
box.
cubes
Okay.
in here to resolve combat. And
Oh, okay. Okay.
not all the cubes come out because there's little ledges inside here. So some of the cubes get stuck.
You get stuck. Okay. Intentionally. Okay, that's very
So
interesting design.
so
Yeah.
every the in Grendel we have these towers and you put tokens in them, and inside the towers are these seesaws. And once
Mm.
enough weight gets put on them, it'll trigger and a mayhem phase will happen. So every game has
Oh.
a really cool, neat component or mechanic
Mhm.
or thought to it with its that just people have never seen before. So I want to always create stuff that like I've never seen that. What is that? And gamers love that kind of stuff. Like I'm a gamer, so I'm like, as
Mm.
soon as I see a cool component, I'm like, I want to play that. How does that work? How's that
Mm.
going to affect my decisions in a game? I can't wait to see.
I see, I see, I see. Yeah, that's actually a very unique mechanism that you just showed me. So for the listener that's listening, you can also watch our video on YouTube
I
channel
see.
to see
Yes.
the to see the mechanism. So out of all the different like games that you have launched, can you share some of the like interesting or surprising story that when you're designing and all the different kind of iterations you went through?
Yeah. I mean, everything from there was a funny story with Core of Discovery in that we were trying to. That's based on the Manifest Destiny comic book, and Matthew Roberts was the artist on that, and he did a new cover for us. And I kept asking for more art for some of the components in the board, and of this, we wanted the board in the game to have this foresty scene on it. I'm like, can you do that for us?
Mhm.
And he kept delaying and delaying and delaying. We had to do the samples that we got out to our content creators without.
Oops, I think I lost you, Jade. Hey Jay, welcome back. Can you hear me now? Oops. Hey Jay, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Your camera is not on for some reason.
Yeah. I have two camera things open, but if I close this window, it just logs me out entirely. But I can this whole time I've been able to see you.
Yeah, I was able to see you earlier for the first half. I don't know what happened. We'll make sure we edit this out later. So
How do I?
can you click on the gear icon setting to see if you can change the video setting?
Yeah, it's got it. Yeah, I try to do it as. There we go.
Okay, now I can see you again. So
Now I'm getting. I
Yeah.
have it open in two windows. If I close one of them, it closes both of them.
Oh really? It
Yeah.
shouldn't. Yeah, if you close one of the tab, then you should be fine. Yeah.
Okay, watch. I'm gonna close this one. That one's still open. I'm gonna close this one, and I'm gonna pop out.
Oh, what the heck? That was weird. Welcome back again.
Same thing. So I got two going on, but that's what
Oh,
it'll have to be then. No biggie.
I see. Okay, I don't know what sometimes technical error.
Should I start by telling that story again?
Yes. Can you kind of touch on that story? Can you kind of restart that story again?
Yep. Yeah, there's one time when we were making Core Discovery. Matthew Roberts is the illustrator for the comic. He did a cover for us, and we asked him for some more art for the board of this forest scene. And it was kind of funny because I kept asking him, and he was just so busy with some other comics he was doing, and he kept delaying. Eventually, I said, "Hey, it's not amazing like character work and stuff like that from the comic. It's just a forest scene. Can I outsource this and ask some other person who can kind of mock your style to make it look like it fits in the world? Can I ask somebody else?" He goes, "Yeah, totally fine. Don't do it." And so I went on this Discord channel that I was part of that had some comic creators in it. And I said, "Hey, is anybody can mock Matthew Roberts style and do a forest, bird's eye view of a forest?" And one guy named Owen Gianni replies, he goes, "Yeah, I could easily do that." He goes, "I was the inker for the comic Manifest Destiny."
Oh, okay.
I'm like, "Oh, well, that's great." So he is very familiar with Matthew Roberts style because he inked all of Matthew Roberts art. So he got to do that art for it. And then it was kind of also funny when I eventually billed him for the work and paid him for his invoice. I see his invoice, and he lives in the same city I live in. I'm like, "What?"
Oh,
So we went out and had lunch together. It was really
oh,
great.
nice. Okay, nice. Yeah, and one more thing I want to ask is because I know you also teach game design for years. Can you kind of talk about like what do you teach in your course, and also like what are some of the common mistakes the new designer goes through?
Sure. So I do teach at Vancouver Film School, which is an online, in person, but they teach game design for video game design as a program.
Video, okay.
But I teach board game design as one of the first classes that they take to understand the iterative aspect of game design, and they make it, board games, and they really understand. They find a lot of value in, and that's where they learn about mechanics and decisions and uncertainty and all these tools they have as designers. So it's a very valuable course, and I'm super glad that VFS believes in the course, and I've been doing it for 12 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then I also have converted my own lessons into a course through a site called failfaster.ca. And on Failfaster, I teach a class on how to design your first board game.
Okay.
And so it's a bunch of videos that you can partake in, but I also interview other popular game designers to get their input on all the different topics.
Okay.
And so a lot of times, some early mistakes is just not understanding the value of how important meaningful decisions are. And that's the crux of how we create really fun games, is through meaningful decisions. And so sometimes if a game is, move on these face down tiles and flip the tiles up, that's the entire game is exploring this dungeon or whatever, a haunted castle, and you're moving and flipping tiles up. Eventually you just feel like this is everything is full of guessing. You have no idea what's under any tile. While there is some tension to be had about, oh, I wonder what's here. If the entire game is that, that's an example of not a very meaningful decision, because you just go to the closest tile. It doesn't matter. Everything doesn't matter. So that's an example of like really not understanding how important meaningful decisions are, and how can we turn that experience into something meaningful.
I see. Okay. And what are some of the like important component based on experience that all the games that in order for it to be successful that they should have?
Meaningful decisions, absolutely. That's huge. It's the most important thing.
Okay. I see. And also looking back, like what is one thing that you wish you have done differently in your journey as far as launching your publishing company?
That's a good question. In one way, you might say I wish I did it earlier, because now I'm in one way, but my management was the perfect game to start a company off of, because it ended up being a big hit. So it was great to have some financial success with that, to give me some breathing room to make a company. But now for the last year, I've been doing this full time. So before that, I was running the company on the side, as a part-time job. This is now my full-time gig, which is exciting. And it's been my dream for 20 years to work full-time in the board game industry. So
congratulations.
I wish I could have gotten here sooner, but all of the success has led to why that's a success.
I just went full time 3 years ago myself, so I know how it is like to work, a career and still try to grow the business on the weekend and in the evenings, and try to make it work. And I want to transition to talk a little bit about like digital marketing based on your experience with the publishing company. What are some of the marketing strategy or things that you have done that was very successful for all the different board games that you carry?
I mean, in a way, the whole entire crowdfunding scene with Kickstarter is a marketing strategy, just using that entirely, right? But obviously, I do all the Facebook ads and a little bit on Google, but mostly Meta Facebook ads. But I partnered with other companies like Jellup and Launchboom and Wayfinder, different companies to help, for different aspects, whether it's for a campaign or outside of a campaign, and mixed results on those all the time. But Launchboom ended up being really good because they actually spent time teaching me how to do a lot of the things. So I'm actually able to do some of the things that I couldn't understand before. So that's really nice.
Launchboom was on our podcast recently as well.
Perfect. There was a big challenge with them when they first came into the board game scene. They had been working outside of the board game. Part of their strategy was asking customers to put $1 down, and then they get like a free mini expansion or something like that. And so I saw Botany was the first board game to do it, and they made over $1 million. I'm like, that sounds great. I'll join this thing too. And when I joined it, and then another publisher joined it, all of a sudden the content creators in the board game world started putting posts out about how they called it predatory and
for $1.
They didn't like it. They was really up in arms against the entire dollar thing.
I see. Oops, I think I lost you again, Jay. Sorry for the technical difficulty we're having today.
I'm not even pressing anything, so I don't know what's happening. You know what's happening?
I don't know what's going on. But so go back. You were talking about your experience with the crowdfunding, and when Launchboom first introduced the idea of using $1 reservations. If you can continue.
So with Launchboom, they didn't start in the board game industry, but when they first came in the board game industry, Botany was their first example that they did. This $1, put it down now and you get a free mini expansion or something like that. And it did $1 million or more. And so I was like, wow, this looks great. So I joined up and a couple others joined up, but then some content creators came out and started doing these podcasts and videos and whatnot, not liking this whole dollar pre-pledge thing. And some called it predatory, some called it anti-consumerism, and it was very up in arms. They've got a lot of people very vocal, and I even got some very angry emails from my customers and backers saying,
really?
I'm never going to back a game of yours again. And they're just so against this dollar concept, which outside of board games is like normal and fine. It's like it's not a big deal. It's like a coupon or whatever. But in board games, they're just tired of the, okay, you're asking me to put $1 down for a game that I don't know anything about because the Kickstarter campaign's not even out yet. So I don't even know anything about it yet.
Yeah.
I got to put $1 down and give you my credit card information. Then when the Kickstarter comes out, I got to give you another pledge and give you my credit card information on this other platform. And then the pledge manager comes out and I got to pay for shipping and give you my credit card a third time. I have to pay and interact with you 3 times to make one sale. And it's just a little too much, and backers were not liking it. So I actually canceled that and refunded everybody their $1 and changed it. But even still, Launch Boom learned a lot from that as well. And they still offered if you want to do it, but they have other options that if you want to partner with Launch Boom and not do the $1, they have options that they can still use their platform and messaging system effectively.
I see. Yeah. Thank you for sharing the background story behind that. It's just kind of interesting that the people was very angry because of the $1 reservation.
It surprised me. So, I realized in hindsight that it's kind of like an early bird, right? Where if you hear about this ad saying, "Hey, get $1, you get this thing that might be available later for $5. You got it for $1." So it's effectively an early bird. And in board game world, I actually don't like early bird as a marketing tactic. I find personally when I see a game has an early bird, but I missed it, I feel bad. I'm like, oh, I could have got it for $5 cheaper. I missed it. I didn't know about it back then. I know about it now. So it feels bad. It's great for the people that got it, and then everybody else, it feels bad. So I don't like early bird. So in hindsight, I if I would have realized that that's just like an early bird thing, I might not have done it.
I see. Yeah. But on the marketing, on the marketer perspective, actually the $1 campaign is brilliant because you have people that's more committed. Because the problem with like running like pre-launch campaign is you get tons of emails, people sign up, but they never bought anything. So you waste all the time chasing people that have like empty email that doesn't do anything. So
they say it's upwards of 30 times more likely to back your product when they already have $1 committed.
Exactly. I think it's the the commitment, even so it's only $1.
Yeah, but I'm never going to do it because the board game community doesn't like it. So I'm like, why would I do it? My brand is more important than what people think of my brand. Even if it's a small vocal minority that don't like it, even if that's true, I was like, why do I want to have my brand tarnished by those people? I don't.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting case study.
Yeah.
So that we can thank you so much for sharing that as well. So I know, sorry again for the technical difficulty we're having, but I think the interview was actually really, really great so far. And what is some of the things that you're working on in 2025 and beyond?
Yeah, well, the big one is Grendel, which is we're getting ready for the Kickstarter right now. We're just sent the files off to their manufacturer to get samples made so that we can send to content creators. That's you were talking about marketing strategy. That's a big part of my marketing strategy is getting all the content creators, I want to hit as many as I can and get it out so they can preview it and talk about it and to their people and their channels, and their audiences, and get them so that, because the big thing with Kickstarter is when you launch your Kickstarter, you don't want anybody saying, I've never heard of that before. Where'd this game come from?
Yeah.
You want people anticipating, goes, I can't wait for Grendel. I saw this video on these guys did it. You want everyone to know about it. So that's my big belief. And then I also believe in the content creators, because then maybe a few months later or a year later, they do another video saying, here's the best board game covers ever. And maybe your game will be featured on that. Or here's the best scary games for Halloween, and maybe your game will be. So you're part of their consciousness, and they've played your game. So now your game is part of their list of games they know about, and it just might get free advertising in the future from other top 10 lists of things that they do or whatever.
I see. And will you say your core audience is more on the mature side? What would be the typical age group for you?
Currently, all of our games are very adult, like Mind Management, Psychic Espionage, Harrow County, Gothic Horror, Core of Discovery, Exploring America, but full of monsters. Like it's very, and Grendel, he's the personification of aggression. Like they're very adult comic books.
I see. Got it. And besides the trade show, and you also mentioned about sending out like different copy to potential influencers, what other marketing like strategy that has been working well?
Yeah, there's not, besides content creators, I mean, and there's conventions that are consumer facing, but then there's also business facing trade shows like Gamma.
Yes,
just
yeah.
happened, or like distributors have trade shows like ACD or Alliance or Universal in Canada. They
Yeah.
have trade shows that just retailers attend.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's a
yeah.
lot of value in those because
Okay.
I just hired my second full-time person here working at Off the Page Games, and they're going to be doing B2B sales.
Oh,
They just
yeah.
started last week. So
Okay.
looking forward to getting, more direct sales to retailers off the ground.
Yeah, that's a whole different ball game.
Yes.
Definitely more a lot more legwork.
Yeah.
For sure. Thank you so much for sharing that. So as well, wrapping up today's interview, if you have to share just one piece of advice with someone that's just getting started in the tabletop gaming industry, what would that be?
If you're a designer, then try to stick with the designing as much as possible and learn as much as you can from all the different avenues and be involved and engaged in your industry as possible. Whether that's being engaged on social media, whether that's going to in-person or virtual playtesting events and helping other people playtest, let alone getting your games playtested and getting really ingratiated into the industry as much as possible. Going to conventions, maybe helping other publishers out at conventions at their booth. So you're getting in the industry as much as you can, so you can learn and try to get your game published by other publishers. So you learn as much as you can, before you take the route of self-publishing, if that's ever an interest you have.
I see. Yeah, and I think networking is definitely very important within the industry. So, okay, and where is the best place for people to find you online?
Yeah, it's offthepagegames.com, and any social media is Off the Page Games.
Okay, got it. We'll make sure we put that in the show note. And for our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode, Toy Business Unboxed podcast. We hope you enjoy the conversation and find it insightful and inspiring. If you like what you have heard, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. We really appreciate your support and would love it. You can leave us a review and share the podcast with your friend and colleague. For more resource tips and the latest update in the toys and game industry, visit our website at toy-launch.com. Join the conversation and connect with us on social media using hashtag Toy Business Unboxed. We'd love to hear your feedback and suggestions for future episodes. Until next time, keep innovating, keep creating, keep bringing joys to toys. This is Jason Shea signing off on the Toy Business Unboxed podcast. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye-bye.